All right, cool. We are live. We've got Kevin Kennedy with Cravat Law, attorney, today with us. And what we're going to be doing today is discussing. Kevin is specializes in homeowners association law, and just like to do a quick introduction, ask a few questions as it relates to homeowners association law and stuff that might be able to help people that have questions about what HOAs do, how they handle things, late payments, what the process is to, essentially start a foreclosure, people that own the properties, what their options are at the point that the foreclosure starts, that kind of stuff, and then anything else that will help people that own property or beneficiaries to owning properties that are owned by a homeowners association, to give them a little clearer idea instead of wondering or doing fireside chit chat about how things work in that system. So, Kevin, if you'll take the floor here and kind of give us a background on your experience in law, where you started, and how you've gotten to the point where you are today. Please.
Sounds good. Yeah, Kevin Kennedy. I've been practicing since 2008. Went to law school at Nova Southeastern, undergrad at University of Miami. Pretty much been South Florida, most of my life. Grew up in St. Lucie County with our friend here, Gabe, old soccer pals from high school. So, yeah, most of my time practicing has been spent dealing with condominiums and homeowners associations. I've had some experience with some prior firms upon graduating, and a couple of years after, decided I think I can do this as good as anybody else. So I started my own shop, Kevin M. Kennedy, PA. That would have been 12 years ago now. And then actually, it's coming up on the 2-year anniversary. My good friend Corey Cravat and I, Corey, who's done the same kind of work for even a little longer than I have, we decided to merge our firms, and we merged our firms under the Cravat Law umbrella. We handle condominium association work, homeowner association work, everything from collection of assessments, rewriting governing documents, declarations, violations. We handle arbitration cases, and anything that you can think of that falls into that realm. But what some people don't know is that we also handle it on behalf of homeowners a lot of times, if the case is right. And obviously, we don't have any conflict. So we've had some great success with some of the homeowner cases that we've had, but the bread and butter of our practice has been representing condominiums and homeowners associations. I'd say we have, I know that the other day I put a new client in, we were up to 620 something. So, with probably about 300-400 of those being associations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's quite a lot of experience that you built up over the time. How did you meet Corey, and how did you guys come to merging your firms?
Yeah, so Corey and I became friends. Let's see, it was in 2009. We were both working at a condo HOA firm. We were there for about a year together, and just always in and out of offices, bouncing ideas off each other about the cases that we're working on. Very great mutual respect for each other, blossomed into a nice friendship. Corey ended up actually performing the wedding service for my wife and I. So we've been great friends since 2009. We'd always talked about kind of merging our firms at some point. He was up in Boca, I was down in Weston area, and a couple of years ago, the whole landscape came together perfect, and we that was when we pulled the trigger on it finally.
Cool. And just a quick side note, it's funny, Kevin and I haven't seen each other since high school, and Eitan and I were in court in Palm Beach County at a property that we were working on purchasing through a client. And here we are in the courtroom, and I see sitting over here, Kevin Kennedy, no idea that you would become an attorney. and here you were. So that was crazy.
Definitely.
Yeah. So Eitan, anything you want to add at this point before we get into a few of the questions, or maybe you want to start with a question?
Yeah. So Kevin, we work with a lot of homeowners who are in some type of foreclosure. I'd say, maybe it's 50-50 mix between mortgage foreclosure and homeowners association foreclosure. Typically, when we're working with sellers who are in the midst of a homeowners association foreclosure, it's for back due assessments. But I'm curious, what other types of things are associations foreclosing on properties for? What other types of violations or delinquencies or breaches are they foreclosing for?
Sure. So typically, it's going to be assessments, non-payment of regular maintenance assessments. But from time to time, there's going to be other things that pop up, right? Special assessments are going to fall in that same kind of realm as regular maintenance assessments. They're just not what your coupon book says you're paying each month. Those are the things that happen when the condo needs to fix the roof and doesn't have the reserve money, and they need to pass a special assessment so that they can fund that project or whatever it might be. So special assessments can fall into that. I just want to let your listeners know personally, if I'm not representing somebody, I can't technically give them legal advice. So nothing that I can say today can technically be construed as giving legal advice to anybody listening here. But obviously, should somebody need some help, we'd be happy to consult and see if there's something we can do. Additionally, in Florida statute 720 and 718, 718 is the condominium statute and 720 is the homeowner association statute. They have remedies for violations for the association. So if an association has an owner that has a violation on their property, they don't cure it, and then they start to levy fines on that unit owner or homeowner. Depending on how the governing documents are written, there's an opportunity or a possibility that those fines could become a lien against the property. So in certain situations, you have somebody that maybe has a yard that is needs to be mowed, or a yard that needs to be resodded and they haven't done it for a while. Those types of things, if they linger, could become some issues where the owner could see themselves have a violation fine assessed, which later could become an individual assessment against their property. But then I also, a lot of people will say, well, I paid some assessments late, but I've been paying them. Owners also need to be aware of the application of payment portion of 720 and 718 that dictates how we attorneys and the homeowner associations or condo associations have to apply the payments when they come in. They have to be applied first towards interest, late fees, then attorney's fees and costs, and then finally towards the assessments. So even though somebody's maybe getting a little bit behind, but they think that they're paying the assessments and that they shouldn't be penalized for it, because of the way the Florida statute mandates that we apply those payments, sometimes they're not getting caught up.
That brings up a really good question that I have that I hear somewhat regularly, Kevin. Once an auction date, maybe if you could, from a broad overview, talk about the steps in the process that occur for when the property actually ends up getting set to go to auction. So a payment is missed, or two payments, three. How many payments are missed before the foreclosure process starts is the first question. Mm-hmm. And then the backup question of that is, once the auction date is actually set, can payment plans be worked out with an individual from that point?
Sure. So every association is going to be different on this. Some of them have strict guidelines of how they manage their own properties. And some may say, okay, if somebody is 90 days delinquent on assessment payments, we're going to send them to the attorney. Some of them, maybe they don't have it as formally set out. But typically, if you miss your first payment, you're not necessarily getting sent to the attorney. A lot of times the management company will send you a reminder letter and say, hey, you didn't pay your December 2021 assessment. Please bring that current within the next 10 days. So it depends on each association. But there was a change in the statute this year. So before the association can send it to the attorney, they have to send the association and or their manager has to send a certified notice to the owners. Once that certified notice happens, typically it's going to be 30, 45, maybe 60 days, depending on lag time and how long it takes for the manager to get things turned over to the attorney. Once it's in the attorney's office, we're going to send our first notice of intent to lien. And that's going to give the owner, again, 30 to 45 days, depending if they're in a condo or HOA. And then if they fail to pay within that 30 to 45 days, the next step would be filing a notice of intent to foreclose and a claim of lien on the property. After that claim of lien is filed, again, assuming that the owner still has not paid, then it would go to foreclosure. So the lis pendens would be filed, the foreclosure would be filed. And I think if anybody listening has spoken to any foreclosure defense attorney, they would tell you that to pay the HOA assessment or figure out a way to work out something with the HOA or condo association, because the condo and HOA typically can move their cases quicker than the lender foreclosure. And there's maybe less that they can do in defense of a lot of those cases, because if the association's attorney is following the statutes, then there's limited defenses. But once an association foreclosure is filed, again, assuming a pretty uneventful case, you're probably looking at 6 to 12 months on average until that property has a final judgment entered against it and is going to a foreclosure sale. The statute requires that once the final judgment's entered, 35 days is the minimum time for the foreclosure sale to be set after that final judgment. But to answer the other question that you posed, even if a final judgment is entered and a foreclosure sale is set, is there still something that the owners can do? And again, a lot of times the answer is yes. It's going to depend on the attorney that's representing the association. It's going to depend on the association themselves and what they're willing to do. But I tell everybody this, that I'm in a Zoom hearing across the table from, whether it's an owner or their attorney, the associations don't want the property. They want these are nonprofit entities that have their budget every year, that want to be able to pay to maintain the lawn or the streets or the roofs or whatever it is they need to maintain under that budget. And they don't want to be in situations where they're foreclosing on people. So they typically want to work stuff out. It's just a matter of whether or not you can find that happy medium of, okay, this is what I can afford to pay, and this is how quick I can afford to pay it, and try to work something out on a repayment plan.
Awesome. Eitan.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. You mentioned that the associations don't really want the properties, but, and I agree with you, but, oftentimes if there's a mortgage or something, or I'm sorry, if there's no mortgage and maybe the property was owned free and clear, the property will sell, and the association doesn't get stuck with it, and the association will just get their money. So, although I agree with you, if for our viewers, I wouldn't take that to mean that you can take advantage of the associations and say, and wait till the 11th hour, in hopes that, well, the association doesn't want the property, so we can just wait to do that. Plus, you have to get paid. So the attorney's fees do rack up. And so if you don't pay your assessments on time and you say, well, I'll just wait till it gets to foreclosure, there's going to be fees, penalties, interest, attorney's fees. And it's just, the whole final judgment amount mushrooms.
Yep.
So just want to caution our viewers for that. But one thing that, Gabe?
To that point, don't forget what you're going to say, Eitan, but one of the questions that I was going to ask, or that we've heard before, is this is all I owe. I'm not paying attorney's fees, right? So auction dates set. Attorney's fees obviously rack up. If they don't pay the attorney's fees, will the auction still take place if it's set?
Yeah. Well, if it's set, yes. I mean, the owners can, if there's a final judgment that's been entered, owners could go to the clerk of court and say, hey, I want to pay this judgment off. Even I don't want to deal with the attorney. I want to pay this judgment off. Well, if the attorney's fees are part of that final judgment, then yes, in order to get that sale canceled, they're going to have to pay those attorney's fees, the interest, the late fees, all the costs that the attorneys have incurred from the filing fees, service of process, all those things. So yes, you guys are both 100% right. It does. It mushrooms out of control. And so the best way to deal with these are to get ahead of the problem and not let it linger.
Cool. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, Eitan.
No problem. So, so Kevin, one of the main groups of people who we work with when we encounter HOA foreclosures are estates. So we purchase a lot of properties from the heirs of somebody who's lived in a property who's passed away. It's in a homeowners association or a condo association. And oftentimes, because of everything that's going on in their lives, they, maybe they think that the maintenance is being paid, or they aren't even thinking about it because they don't have to pay that at home in their property where they live. And so it just kind of, they don't really think about it. And then all of a sudden, they find out that they're in foreclosure, which, is obviously happening at a difficult time for them. So, what do you advise people who are going through a situation where maybe, because they're not bad people, they're not intentionally delinquent, and it's not even their property, it's owned by a deceased family member. How would you advise them to handle a situation like that?
Sure. So, a lot of that may be better posed to an attorney that deals with probate type work, right? Because sometimes, again, I don't practice probate, so I can't speak to it specifically or with the intelligence that my probate colleagues would be able to. But you can disclaim interests in property if you don't want to accept it as part of the estate that is coming to you, Eitan, or to you, Gabe. If one of your relatives passed and they leave you their condo and it is an anchor around your feet, right? You don't necessarily have to accept that bequest, but let's say there's a home or a condo, and a lot of times, especially down here, especially right now, there's equity, right? So even though you maybe don't want to use it to live in it, or maybe you can't live in it because it's a 55 and up community, or whatever it is, right? There's still probably a way to salvage some benefit from the property, whether it's being able to bring it out of foreclosure by resolving something with the association or the mortgage lender, and then being able to sell it for a profit. Because a lot of times nowadays with our market, there is equity in these homes, and there are plenty of people that are willing to work with the heirs to figure out a way that can get the heirs some money and to get that property off of their backs. Because like I said, it may not be something that they want to deal with long term, but in the short term, finding an attorney that can work with you to resolve things with the association, resolve things with the mortgage lender, and bring that property either back current or on a modification type plan or repayment plan with the association, whatever it might be, it's probably going to benefit you in the long run to get on top of that quick. And then, again, once you're able to clear up that debt, or while you're clearing up that debt that your deceased relative may have incurred, you're going to be able to find some way to turn that property into an asset for the estate.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely been very helpful as far as offering some clarity, and as far as how the process works, how the foreclosure works. Obviously, it can be a lot faster than a typical mortgage foreclosure. I think that's all that I wanted to cover. Also wanted to cover one last thing at the end here, but Eitan, as it relates to this, any other questions that you'd like to ask Kevin at this point?
No, nothing except, Gabe, before the call, you and I were talking about 55 plus communities. And so I'm not sure if that was the last question that you had, or if I should.
No, go ahead.
So Kevin, you mentioned briefly before, if somebody isn't able to use a property because they're not 55, they may desire to sell the property. So that's a situation that we see. Also, Gabe and I think you put our ages together, we're probably not even 55, and we oftentimes, when we're buying properties, find that associations perhaps are mistaken and say, well, you guys can't buy in here because you're not 55. And we say, well, we're not buying it to live there. We have our own homes, but we're purchasing it as an investment, whether it's to fix it up and resell it or something. But just kind of a little bit of clarification on when we're having discussions with associations and people who might be concerned about selling a 55 plus property to a bunch of guys like us, thinking that we might not be able to purchase it because we're not of age.
Sure. And so sometimes that's going to depend on how strictly worded the governing documents are going to be. But if you're not 55 and you're planning on buying it, in an LLC or in a land trust there are different avenues for purchasers to buy those types of properties. Just because you may not be living in there, if someone that would be residing in the property was 55 and up, that may be sufficient. Again, depending on the wording of the governing documents, right? So you could own the property, but you could rent it out to a 60-year-old widower that needs somewhere to live. And so that might very well satisfy the requirements of the governing documents.
Awesome.
Cool.
And lastly, Kevin, I know you're a part of an organization. If you would share a little bit about that, especially this time of year. Our Eitan and I recently donated to the organization and would love for you to share with the public a little bit about that and what the mission is for that.
Definitely. No, thank you. I appreciate it. The organization is called House of Blue Hope. We actually, when I was at University of Miami, one of my best friends there, Billy Blugis, after we graduated, he moved to Tanzania for a couple of years in East Africa. He was teaching English and math. He met up with who's now all of our good friend Dowdy Mboa, who the two of them saw this dire need in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, where there's so many kids whose parents have passed away, whose parents can't care for them. These kids are begging on the streets. And so they decided to set up the House of Blue Hope with the mission of overcoming poverty through education. And so the goal of the organization is to identify with the social workers that we employ high-risk cases of children that parents can't support them, or maybe the parents are deceased. We bring them into the House of Blue Hope. We currently operate 4 different houses and a daycare facility where we house 50 kids right now. Our goal over the next 2 years is to increase to 100 children that we take care of. We are their family. So all of our staff in Tanzania are these children's family. We house them, we feed them, we clothe them, we pay for their medical care, and we send them to private schools in Tanzania, because the government schooling isn't necessarily the best ways for a child in Tanzania to get ahead. So we try to take in kids around 3-4 years old, and then we take care of them all the way through the equivalent of high school and or university in Tanzania. If they're going to that next step, we've been it's been a huge passion project for me. This last month, I was actually elected as the new board president. So I'm going to have the honor to kind of lead this organization over the next 2 years, where we're looking, like I said, to double the amount of kids that we're bringing in. We're trying to build a STEM lab facility to give these children, even more avenues to explore when they're looking at what they want to be when they grow up, and some different opportunities through, learning how to code and doing all those kind of new STEM type of STEM education type work that is really emerging, especially in a place like Tanzania, where technology, still hasn't necessarily caught up, but it is emerging. And so to have these kids be able to learn those types of things over there is a huge potential advantage when they are able to graduate high school equivalent or college equivalent. And my hope is, travel restrictions willing, I'm going to be going to Tanzania this summer for the first time to actually visit the houses and the children. But it's been an amazing ride the last 3 years doing it. And yeah, I mean, we can't do what we do without the support of our donors. So obviously, huge shout out to all of them. If anybody watching wants to learn any more about it, you can go to www.houseofbluehope.org and check it out. And my email is for that venture. My email is kkennedy, so KKENNEDY @houseofbluehope.org. So if anybody ever wants to ask any questions or see how they can help out or get involved, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about it. So I really appreciate you guys having me on today. Hope I answered some good questions for you, and obviously I'm happy to join you again in the future.
That's great. All right, so we got www.houseofbluehope.org.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put your contact information as well in the description below this.
Awesome.
Thanks a ton for meeting with us. Eitan, do you have any final words you'd like to ask or share?
No, sounds like a great mission, Kevin, and glad to be a part of it. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Kevin.